Underneath the streets of Colchester in England, there's a black line of dirt. That line, as an entire Roman city, burns to the ground in a single night. This is just why I love archaeology so much, because we know that someone lived here. When it started, they dug a hole in the middle of their floor. They hid their gold and silver and covered it up. They thought they would come back for it, but they never did. The woman that burned this city was called Boudica. And for someone this famous, we know surprisingly nothing true about her. In fact, the one thing everyone thinks they know about Boudica probably never happened. But what we do know is this. In the year 60 AD, she led a revolt that burned 3 Roman cities off of the map. Colchester was the first, London was the second, and a town we now call St Albans was the third. And here's the quiet tragedy underneath all of it. Almost everyone that could have told us who she really was died in the fires. We don't know how old she was. We don't know the name of her 2 daughters or how old they were. We don't even know what she looked like. So we're left with 2 questions. How did Rome, the most powerful empire on earth, lose 3 cities in a matter of months? And the number everyone remembers is the 70,000 dead. Did that really happen? Or is it a number Rome told itself? Hold on to both of these, because the answer to it is buried under the ground, and I promise you, it's stranger than you might think. To understand how it happened, you have to understand how confident Rome was. By the year 60, the Romans had been in Britain for about 17 years. They'd taken the entire south. They built towns and roads and a proper Roman way of life, and they were pushing further every single year. As far as Rome was concerned, southern Britain was won. And of all the moments for it to go wrong, this is the part that gets to me. The Roman governor, the most senior soldier in the entire country, was as far away as he physically could be. He was on the far west coast, on the island of Anglesey, stamping out one of the last strongholds of the Druids. His army was with him, which meant the rich that settled east of Britain, full of Roman towns and Roman money, was left completely undefended. And that is where everything went wrong. Boudica's husband was a king, not a Roman, but a local ruler who had made a deal with Rome. He kept his crown, and in return he stayed loyal. It had worked for years. When he died, he tried to protect his family with one clever move. In his will, he left half of his kingdom to his 2 daughters, and the other half to the Roman emperor. The idea was simple. Give Rome a share, and Rome will leave the rest of you alone. Rome took the share, then Rome took everything else. The Roman officials moved in and treated the kingdom like property they had bought. According to the Roman writer Tacitus, our main source for all of this, Boudica was publicly flogged, essentially publicly beaten. Her 2 daughters were also assaulted. The leading families of her people had their land stripped away, and some of the royal household were sold into slavery. Now, there's an honest complication here, and I'm going to give it to you straight. Here, we have the second Roman account, and it tells the money side of the story instead. It says Roman rulers suddenly called in huge debts all at once and squeezed the region dry. So the Romans themselves remember it 2 different ways. One remembers an abused royal family, the other remembers a financial crisis. And if you ask me, they were probably both happening at the same time. The point is, by year 60, Roman rule in the East had become something ready to catch fire, and it just needed a spark. Boudica was the spark. Here's something legend gets wrong. This was never just one woman's revenge. When Boudica rose up, a neighbouring tribe rose with her. They had their own reasons to hate Rome. Their land had been handed to retired Roman soldiers who threw them out of their own homes and treated them like conquered people. And there was one building they hated more than any other. In Colchester, the Romans had built an enormous temple for the Emperor Claudius. To the Romans, it was a symbol of their power. To the locals, it was a monument paid for with their own money to worship the man that had conquered them. Keep your eye on that temple, because when the revolt came, it's where the last Romans in Colchester would make their final stand. Colchester never stood a chance. It was a wealthy town full of Roman settlers, and it had no walls. When word came that Boudica's army was coming, the most senior Roman official in the region just sent 200 lightly armoured men to defend it. Nobody dug a ditch, nobody built a big wall. The old people and the children were never sent away for safety. And that last detail is a hard one to sit with, honestly. Then Boudica's army arrived, and they were not interested in taking any prisoners. The town was overrun and set on fire. The surviving Romans fell back to one strong place that they had, the Great Temple. They barricaded themselves inside the stone building at its heart, and they held on. They held for 2 days. On the third day, the temple was stormed, and everybody inside was killed. And this is where the past reaches and touches the present. That temple was so massive that its stone foundations are still here today. When the Normans came to England 1,000 years later, they built a castle right on top of it. If you ever get a chance, go to Colchester Castle, if you're in England of course. You can go down into the vaults and stand on the actual base of the temple where these Romans spent their last 2 days alive. Researching this topic, it comes across very strange, but also quite a powerful thing, that you can go and stand on a floor like that. A Roman legion did try and save the town. Hundreds of soldiers marched to rescue, and Boudica's army ambushed them on the road and wiped out the foot soldiers. The commander escaped with a handful of horsemen. That was the most powerful response Rome could throw at her, and she destroyed it. And somewhere in the ashes of Colchester was that little hole in the floor that we had in the intro to this video, with the gold and the silver hidden inside of it. Whoever buried all of that was now gone. By now, the governor has heard the news, all the way over on the west coast. He turned his army around and raced east, and he got to London ahead of the rebels. London wasn't a fortress, it was a young, busy trading town on the river, full of merchants, and when the government looked at it, he made one of the coldest decisions in Roman history. He worked out that he didn't have enough men to save it. If he tried to defend London, he would lose his entire army, and then Rome would lose Britain. So he chose to give up the entire city. He let anyone that could travel leave with his column. Everyone who stayed, the old, the sick, the ones who couldn't or wouldn't abandon their homes, were left behind to face what was coming. And whatever you think of his decision, that is a heavy thing to do. Then Boudica's army arrived, and London burned, just like Colchester did. You can still find that fire too. Dig beneath the modern city of London, and in the right places, there's that same red layer of scorched earth that remains of the timber town that burnt in the year 60. The third city was a town north of London, on the road the Romans had built. Today we call it St Albans. It wasn't a soldier's town, it was a wealthy, comfortable place full of Britons who had taken up the Roman way of life, and that's exactly why the rebels went for it. It was rich, it was soft, and it had no real defences. The people that burned in that fire weren't foreign occupiers. Many of them were Britons, killed by other Britons for living like Romans. Just sit with that for a second. Killed because they adapted to the Roman way of life, but they were still the people of England, because it tells you how much of a civil war this rebellion was. Now, St Albans teaches us something very important as well on how any of this is even known. And this is the part that is genuinely one of my favourite things about just archaeology in general, as well as this story of Boudica. When archaeologists dig there, they don't find one burnt layer, they find two. One is Boudica's fire in the year 60, The other is a completely separate fire, almost 100 years later. And if you didn't look carefully, you could easily mistake one for the other. The way that you can tell them apart, though, is by looking at what lies below each layer. Like reading pages of a book in order, the deeper fire, sealed under everything else, is Boudica's. Simple as that. Quietly brilliant. This matters because it's the same careful digging that is about to answer our biggest question, the one about 70,000. So let's talk about it. The number everybody remembers. Tacitus, our main Roman source, wrote that about 70,000 Roman citizens and their allies were killed across those cities. Our second Roman writer gave a very different figure. He said 80,000. Two Roman writers, two different huge numbers. And already you should notice something. These aren't counts. Nobody walked the ruins with a list. These are numbers written down by men who wanted to show how terrible this disaster really was. But here's the thing where it gets really strange. We know the fires were real. We can measure that half-meter layer of ash. The destruction is beyond any doubt. But the bodies are not there. And the first time you really hear that, it stops you. It almost doesn't make sense. If tens of thousands of people were slaughtered in these towns, archaeologists would expect to be pulling human remains out of the ground for decades. And they're not. There are a few bones, a jawbone here and there, a shin bone with a blade mark in there, but nothing close to the mountain of dead that number of 70,000 demands. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean nobody died. The fire is real and the killing was real. Tacitus describes a massacre, and the ash agrees with him. What that number really means is that number belongs to Rome, not to the earth. And that's the thing that we keep coming back to. The true count is something the ground is quietly refusing to give up. Tens of thousands may well have died, but the famous figure of 70,000 is a story Rome told about its own worst day. The soil tells a smaller, stranger, more honest version, and it is still keeping some of those secrets. We've not found everything in it yet. Boudica burned 3 cities and destroyed part of a legion, and now the governor had gathered what soldiers he could, around 10,000 men, against a rebel army that is vastly outnumbered to him. On paper, he should have lost, but the governor was a professional. He chose his ground with great care. He put his men on a narrow spot with thick forest at their backs, so no one could get around behind them. In front of them was open ground, where the enemy would have to funnel across essentially a killing field. Boudica's army came at them in great mass, so confident in winning that they brought their families along to watch. And I want you to picture that for just a moment. This story just gets more and more insane. They brought their families to watch this fight. They parked their wagons in a long line at the back of the field, and those wagons were about to cost them everything. The Romans held their nerve. They threw their spears, they drove forward in a tight wedge, cutting into the crowd, and the rebels, packed too close together to fight properly, they broke and had to run. They ran straight into their wagons. The line of carts that they brought to carry home their loot now sealed their escape off. Trapped against them, the rebel army was completely destroyed. We don't know exactly where this happened. No one has ever found the battlefield. It's out there somewhere under the fields of central England, still hidden. One of the most important battles ever fought on British soil, and we've lost the ground that it was fought on. It still astonishes me after doing all the research for this video that there's so many videos on Buried Earth where we find these battlefields and it proves a massive event in history right, but we haven't found this one. And the next thing your mind goes to is, where's Boudica? Boudica simply disappears from history. Tacitus says she took poison rather than to be captured. Other sources say she fell ill and died and was given a rich, costly burial. 2 endings, both from Roman pens, neither one has been proven. No grave has ever been found of hers, the woman that nearly drove Rome out of Britain, who burnt 3 cities and terrified an entire empire, vanishes at the end of her own story. It's almost poetic. We meet her in fire and we lose her in smoke. You would think that that would be the end. Rome smashed, cities in ashes, the entire province in ruins. It wasn't. In the mud of London, archaeologists found something small and astonishing. A thin wooden writing tablet, the kind Romans scratched their notes into. And this one had a date on it. It's a business record, a delivery of 20 loads of goods, moving between two of the cities that Boudica had burned. The date on that tablet was the year 62. And I find this almost funny, in a way that's almost a little bit magnificent as well. That's barely a year after the fires. The ash was practically still warm, and the Roman merchants were already back at work, moving supplies between the ruined towns. Rome had been brought to its knees in Britain, and within 1 year, it was quietly and stubbornly back on its feet, trading and rebuilding, as if the entire thing was just one bad season. We don't know Boudica's face. We don't know her daughters' names, or her age, or where she was buried, or even if she was even in that last battle. Almost everything the legend is sure about, the history can't prove. But go back where this all started, dig beneath Colchester and London and St Albans, and it is all still there. The layer of red and black earth, burnt clay and ash from the year 60 AD, when a British queen very nearly ended Roman Britain. The bronze statue in London is just a guess. The flame red hair is a guess. The 70,000 is just the Roman story. But the fire was not. The fire is real, and it's still in the ground under 3 cities, exactly where she left it. And somewhere in that layer, in a small hole burnt into the floor, someone's gold and silver waited almost 2,000 years for owners that never came home, and we found it. And that's it from me, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video on Buried Earth. My name's Joe. On screen right now, 2 videos I think you're going to absolutely love, and I just want to take a moment and say a massive thank you to all the support on the channel recently. We've been getting a lot of views on some previous videos, so much positivity in the comments. Keep it coming. It makes me so happy. I do read every single comment. I'll see you next video, guys.